Hey guys, today we're going to focus on writing the equation of a circle. The standard form for the equation of a circle looks like this. We've got x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. The h and the k in the equation, that represents the center of the circle. The r represents the radius. Okay, so let's kind of use that to see what we've got here. You can tell right here, it's pretty clear that that point right there is 5. So that represents our radius, because from the center, which is at 0, 0, to a point on the circle, it's 5 units away. So I know I can write my equation like this. My center is at 0, 0, so x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals my radius 5 squared. So we could write the equation for this circle as x squared plus y squared equals 25. Okay, now let's say it's not so easy to see what that radius length is. You'll more than likely be given a point on the circle. Like in this case, we've been given this point right here. And if you'll notice, that's the ordered pair 4, 3. I do know that my center is right here at the origin at 0, 0. And when I draw from the center to that point, that represents the radius. So if I drew a vertical line down, that vertical line, the length of that should be the y value of that ordered pair, which is 3. The x value will be this horizontal line, which is 4. And now I can see I've got a right triangle right here, so I can use Pythagorean theorem to get the radius. I can say 4 squared plus 3 squared equals r squared. So 16 plus 9 equals r squared, which means 25 is equal to r squared. That's where I got this number right here. That's my r squared. And then I could take the square root and figure out that the radius is just 5. Okay, let me show you how this relates to our formula. Okay, so let's say that this point right here that we were just talking about, we don't know what the numbers are. We just know that that's an x and a y. So when I draw that triangle, when I draw from the center to that point on the circle, that's my radius. This represents the y, and this represents the x. Now I've gone from the origin, which makes it a lot easier for me. Next class you're going to learn when you're not at the origin. But I know this distance horizontally is x, because it's x units away from 0. I know this distance here is y. It's y units away from 0. So I can use my Pythagorean theorem. X squared plus y squared equals my radius squared. That's just using that same information inside of the Pythagorean theorem. And this is the equation that we're going to be using today, because our center is going to be at the origin, so this is the way it will end up looking every time. Okay, let's move this up. Okay, so like I said, we are going to focus on when this center of the circle is at the origin today. So my equations today will look just like this. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. So these first three are very basic. Every one of these, you can see that your center is at the origin, 0, 0. And these pictures, it's pretty clear what the radius is. If I look, I have this point right here at 6. So my radius is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. So my equation is going to be x squared plus y squared equals 6 squared, so it's 36. Okay, on this one, again, my center is at the origin. I can tell right here that this point, 1, 2, 3, is 3 units away from the center. So the radius is 3. So your equation will be x squared plus y squared equals 3 squared, or 9. Okay, on this one, you can see your radius is 10, so your equation will be x squared plus y squared equals 100. All right, let's make it a little bit harder. Okay, again, we're making it easy today. Your center is at the origin on every single one of these, 0, 0. Next class, it'll be a little bit harder. Now, it's not as easy for me to tell what that point right there is. I have no idea, really. It's kind of between the 5 and 6, a little closer to the 6. I can't tell. But you can tell that we gave you a clear point right there, and it's at -5, comma 3. So what that tells me is if I were to draw a right triangle, this hypotenuse is the radius of that circle. This horizontal line is the x value, so -5. The vertical line is my y value, so 3. Now I can use the Pythagorean theorem. I can say 3 squared plus a -5 squared equals r squared. 3 squared is 9. A -5 when you square it is 25. It's a positive 25 when you square a negative number. And that equals r squared. So when you add those two, you get 34 equals r squared. So if I wanted to know what the radius is, I would have to take the square root of that. So it'd be square root of 34. So my radius is the square root of 34. Now I have to tell you, on your quiz, you're going to have to write it a little bit differently. We can't do that square root symbol when you write it on the quiz. So we're going to ask that you write SQRT and then 34. That just stands for square root 34. So you'll write it just like this on your quiz. Okay, so your equation is x squared plus y squared, and you're going to do the radius squared. So when you square the square root of 34, you just get plain old 34. All right, on the next one, you've got this point right here. If you'll notice, you've gone over 7 units to the right, and you went down 4 units, so -4. So that's the order pair 7, -4. So when you draw that radius from the center, that's your radius. The horizontal line is 7 units long. The vertical line is a -4 units long. So when you do the Pythagorean theorem, you'll get 7 squared plus a -4 squared equals the radius squared. So 49 plus 16 equals the radius squared. So when you add those together, you get 65 equals the radius squared. That means that your radius will equal the square root of 65. So my radius is the square root of 65. Again, on your quiz, you'll write it as SQRT 65. All right, and then the equation of the circle will be x squared plus y squared equals 65, because you'll square that radius. All right, on this one, we have this point clearly marked. It is at 1, 2, 3, 4. It's at the order pair 2, 4. So drawing from the center to that point on the circle, that represents my radius. The vertical line is 4 units. The horizontal line is 2 units. So doing the Pythagorean theorem, 2 squared plus 4 squared equals r squared. I get 4 plus 16, which is 20. So my radius is the square root of 20. If I were to simplify that, that would be 2 square root of 5. So my radius is 2 square root of 5, and my equation will be x squared plus y squared, and when you square that radius, you're going to get 20. Okay, so that made it a little bit harder. Let's move on. Okay, now we're going to determine if a point is actually on the circle. Now remember, this is an x and this is a y. Basically, you're going to plug those numbers into here to see if it works. The equation for your circle is x squared plus y squared equals 100. So when I do 0 squared plus a -10 and I square it, does it equal 100? If it does, then that's a point on the circle. So 0 when you square it's 0, -10 when you square it is 100, and 100 does equal 100. So I do know that that is a point on the circle. And I'm going to erase all that. All right, I do know that's a point on the circle. Let's check -8 and 6, the order pair -8, 6. Again, that's an x and that's a y. So -8 when you square it plus 6 and you square it, does it equal 100? Well, -8 squared is 64, plus 6 squared is 36, and 64 plus 36 is 100. So 100 does equal 100, which makes that also a point on the circle. All right, let's do the next one, another x and y. So is a -10 when you square it plus a -10 when you square it equal to 100? Well, that's 100 plus 100, that's supposed to be 100, sorry, equals 100. Well, when I add 100 and 100, I get 200, and it does not equal 100. So no, this is not, C is not a point on the circle. All right, I'm going to erase all that to get out of my way. I'm going to write no for this one. Okay, this one, again, that's an x and a y. So when I do 45 squared plus 55 squared, does it equal 100? Well, when you do 45 squared plus 55 squared, you get 5,050, and that definitely does not equal 100, so no, this is not a point on the circle. All right, now it's asking me to do the equation of a circle that passes through this point 2, 9. We know that it passes through that point, and we know it goes through the origin. So if it goes through this point, that's an x and a y. And if it's going through the origin, I know my equation has to look like this. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. I just don't know what that radius is. So what I'm going to do is plug in 2 for x, and I'm going to plug in 9 for y, and I'm going to figure out what the radius squared is. So 2 squared is 4, 9 squared is 81, and that should equal my radius squared. That's 85 equals the radius squared. Now I'm looking for the equation, which is going to look like this. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. So I need my r squared. I'm going to just leave it like that. So my equation will be x squared plus y squared equals 85. That's the equation of the circle. All right, a little bit harder. We're looking for the equation of a circle whose diameter has endpoints at -6, -8, and 6, 8. All right, I'm going to try to draw a circle over here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, I may just draw the diameter. So that's the first point, or the second point actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got a point over here. So this represents your diameter. Okay, I know that it goes through the origin because I go down 8 and over 6, and I go down 8 and over 6. Or I can think about it like this. The midpoint of that line, remember to do the midpoint, you do x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. If I plug those in, I would get -6 plus 6 over 2, and then -8 plus 8 over 2. And that gives me 0 over 2, 0 over 2, which is just the ordered pair 0, 0. So this is the center of my circle because that's the midpoint of that segment. So I know the center is at the origin. So I know when I start off my equation, it's going to be x squared plus y squared because my center is at the origin. Now I just need to figure out my radius. I know that this was 6 units, and I know this was 8 units. So I can probably see that this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, which would make this 10, which makes my radius 10. Or I can do 6 squared plus 8 squared equals r squared. So 36 plus 64 tells me my r squared is 100, which makes my radius equal to 10. So if I'm going to write the equation, it's going to be x squared plus y squared equals my radius squared. So 10 squared is 100. This would be your equation. Another way to do this is I could have used the distance formula. Using both of those 2 points and plugging it into that would have given me the length of either the 2 points you could have chosen could have been the origin and one of the points, and that would allow me to figure out the radius length, or I could have just found the distance between those 2 endpoints of the diameter and then divide it by 2 to get the radius. Just some options. Okay, last part. All right, I cleared all of that off. So now they want you to identify the center and the radius when you've been given an equation. So my center, because I just have x squared plus y squared, tells me my center is at 0, 0. Remember, this represents r squared, so the radius is just going to be the square root of that, or 15. Again, my center is at 0, 0. This 16 represents r squared, so the radius will just be 4. Again, my center is at 0, 0. Now remember, 11 is your radius squared. You have the square root of 11 as the actual radius. And remember, on your quiz, you're going to write square root 11 to show that on the quiz. All right, that's it for our notes. Thanks for listening.